The woman standing in the forbidden archives beneath the city did not scream when she saw him, did not flinch, did not run, and when Iskander Idris, king of the Northern Coven, stepped from the shadows with all the ancient weight of his bloodline hanging in the air around him, she simply looked up from the manuscript she had been reading and said, "I don't fear you." He froze. The words landed in his chest like a blade made of starlight, cutting through centuries of carefully constructed armor. Around them the vaulted ceiling soared into darkness, stone ribs disappearing into black, and the smell of old parchment and older magic hung thick as incense. Iskander had ruled for 300 years. He had walked through wars, through plagues, through the rise and fall of empires. He had made grown men weep with a glance. He had negotiated treaties written in blood and broken rebellions before they could draw breath. No mortal had looked at him without terror and living memory. But this woman, this human researcher, who had somehow bypassed every ward and glamour his people had woven around this place, stood in her simple jeans and sweater with ink on her fingers, and met his eyes as though he were nothing more than another scholar interrupting her work. And he knew her. Not her name, not her face, not the way her dark hair fell over one shoulder, or the precise shade of her eyes in the lamplight. But he knew the shape of her soul. He had been dreaming of her for 100 years. Every night when he closed his eyes, she was there, a figure made of light and shadow, always just out of reach. He would chase her through landscapes that shifted like water, call out to her in languages dead and living, and she would turn, almost turn, but never quite let him see her face. He would wake with her name on his lips, except he did not know her name. He would spend his days ruling his people, arbitrating their disputes, managing their careful coexistence with the human world overhead, and every moment he was aware of the hollow place inside him where she should be. His advisors thought him mad. His court thought him cursed. The seers whispered among themselves and would not meet his eyes. And now she stood before him, real and solid and utterly unafraid, and he could not move, could not speak, could not do anything but stare. "Are you going to say something?" she asked after a moment, "or just loom there looking dramatic?" The words jolted him back into his body. He drew himself up to his full height, let the shadows gather around him the way they always did when he wished to intimidate, let his power unfurl into the room like smoke. His hair, white as bone, stirred in a wind that existed only for him. His eyes, he knew, would be gleaming pale silver in the darkness. "You are trespassing," he said, and his voice came out smooth and cold as a frozen lake. "These archives are forbidden to mortals. The wards alone should have turned you back a dozen times over. How did you get past them?" She shrugged. "I'm very good at research. Your wards are based on a declension pattern from Old Thracian. Once I figured that out, it was just a matter of inverting the third case modifiers." She gestured at the manuscript in front of her. "I'm writing my dissertation on the evolution of blood-binding contracts in Eastern European folklore. Your archives have the only surviving copy of the Codex Sanguinis. I needed to see it." Iskander blinked. In 300 years, no mortal had simply walked through his wards because they had done their homework. The sheer audacity of it left him momentarily speechless. "You could have asked," he said finally. "I did. I sent 5 letters to the Historical Preservation Society over the course of 18 months. They all came back with very polite rejections saying the archives I was looking for didn't exist." She looked at him expectantly. "I assume that was you?" "We prefer," Iskander said carefully, "to keep our existence off the public record. I'm not the public. I'm a doctoral candidate at the university. I have 17 different research clearances and I sign non-disclosure agreements for breakfast." She paused. "Also, I already know you exist, obviously, so that ship has sailed." Despite himself, despite everything, Iskander felt the corner of his mouth twitch. Not quite a smile. He had not truly smiled in decades, but something close. "What is your name?" he asked. "Rowan Grey." She said it simply, as though it were any ordinary introduction, as though she were not standing in the heart of a vampire stronghold speaking to a predator who could kill her before she drew another breath. Rowan. The name settled into him like a key into a lock, like something that had always belonged there. "Miss Grey," he said slowly, "you have entered a place where mortals are not permitted. By the old laws, I would be within my rights to ensure you never speak of what you have seen here. By killing me, you mean? Among other options. But you won't, she said. Not a question. A statement of fact, calm and sure. Why do you say that? She closed the manuscript carefully, handling the ancient pages with a reverence that sent another unexpected pang through his chest. Because if you were going to kill me, you already would have. You've been standing there for 3 minutes working up to the dramatic threat, which means you're trying to scare me into compliance, not actually planning to hurt me. Also, you said among other options, which implies negotiation is on the table. She looked at him again with those steady, fearless eyes. So, what are the other options? Iskander realized, with a sensation very much like falling, that he was in serious trouble. He had spent a century dreaming of this woman. He had built entire fantasies around the moment he might finally meet her, if she even existed outside his sleeping mind. He had imagined 1,000 different scenarios, rescuing her from danger, finding her in some moonlit garden, seeing her across a crowded room and knowing instantly that she was his. Not once had he imagined that she would break into his archives, argue with him about verb declensions, and analyze his threats like a particularly interesting research problem. The other options, he said, gathering the tattered remains of his authority around him like a cloak, involve you signing a rather extensive binding contract that will prevent you from speaking about us to anyone outside these walls and submitting to regular monitoring to ensure compliance. In exchange, you may be granted limited access to our historical collections for your research. Rowan's eyes lit up. Really? Under strict supervision? Whose supervision? He looked at her. He could not seem to stop looking at her. The dream figure who had haunted him for 100 years was standing in front of him arguing about library access, and some part of him that he had thought long dead was waking up, stirring, reaching toward her like a flower turning toward the sun. Mine, he said. She considered this for a moment, head tilted. You're the king, right? Don't you have more important things to do than babysit a graduate student? Normally, yes. So why the personal attention? Because you are the woman from my dreams, because I have been searching for you across a century of darkness, because looking at you makes me feel human again, and I had forgotten what that was like. Because, Iskander said instead, you managed to bypass wards that have stood for 500 years using nothing but linguistic analysis, which makes you either very dangerous or very valuable. I have not yet decided which. Can I be both? That remains to be seen. Rowan smiled then, sudden and bright, and it hit him like a physical blow. In his dreams, she had never smiled. She had been beautiful and distant and unreachable. But this real woman with her ink-stained fingers and her fearless eyes and her smile that made her whole face come alive, this was so much more than any dream. All right, she said, I'll sign your contract, but I want access to the Codex Sanguinis, the Crimson Chronicles, and any primary sources you have relating to the Dacian blood cults of the 1st century. That is a rather extensive request. You said I could have limited access. I'm limiting myself to 3 collections. 3 very sensitive collections. Then you'll have to supervise very carefully. She was still smiling, and there was something in her expression now, something that suggested she knew exactly the effect she was having on him. Iskander drew a breath he did not need. Vampires did not breathe except by habit, except to speak, except when they were unsettled and reaching for the old human comforts. Very well. Come with me. We'll draw up the contract in my study. He turned and walked toward the archive door, expecting her to follow. After a moment, he heard her footsteps behind him, quick and light on the stone floor. They climbed a spiral stair that led up into the hidden heart of his court, through passages carved from living rock, past chambers where his people slept away the daylight hours, or conducted their endless subtle politicking, or simply existed in the beautiful, terrible eternity of their undeath. Several of his court stopped to stare as he passed with a human in tow. He ignored them. He was the king. He owed them no explanations. His study was in the highest tower of the underground complex, a room built to catch any stray light that might filter down through the cunningly disguised shafts that led to the surface. By day, It would be full of reflected sunlight, bright enough to make the room uninhabitable for his kind. By night, it was lit by dozens of candles and the soft glow of modern lamps, a bridge between the ancient and the contemporary. Rowan stopped just inside the doorway, looking around with undisguised wonder. "This is beautiful," she said softly. The room was beautiful. Iskander had made it so over decades of careful collection. Books lined every wall, some bound in leather, some in cloth, some so old they were simply stacks of parchment held together with ribbon. A massive desk dominated the center of the space, its surface covered with papers and maps and correspondence in a dozen languages. Tapestries hung between the bookshelves, medieval and Renaissance and older, their colors still vibrant in the gentle light. "Sit," Iskander said, gesturing to one of the chairs across from his desk. She sat, tucking one foot under her in a gesture that was entirely too comfortable for the circumstances. He moved behind the desk, grateful for the barrier between them, and pulled out a sheet of heavy parchment from a drawer. The binding contract was a standard one, used whenever they needed to bring a mortal into their confidence. It was written in Latin and blood, and it would compel her silence on pain of death should she try to reveal their secrets. He had signed dozens of them over the centuries. They were routine, but his hand hesitated over the parchment. If he did this, if he bound her with blood magic, she would be tied to him in ways that went beyond simple compulsion. She would be able to find him, always. He would be able to sense her emotions, her distress. The bond worked both ways, a safeguard built into the old magic to prevent abuse. He would be giving her access to his mind, his heart, the secret chambers of his soul where he had locked away 100 years of dreams and longing. "Something wrong?" Rowan asked. Iskander looked up. She was watching him with those clear, perceptive eyes, and he wondered what she saw. A monster trying to pass for civilized, a king playing at humanity, or just a man old and tired and desperately lonely who had finally found the one thing he had been looking for. "No," he said. "Nothing is wrong." He drew the contract out fully, dipped a pen in ink mixed with his own blood, and began to write. The terms were standard: silence in exchange for access, monitoring in exchange for protection, a duration of 1 year with options to renew. When he finished, he slid the parchment across the desk to her. "Read it carefully," he said. "Once you sign, the contract is binding. Literally. You will be magically compelled to honor its terms." Rowan picked up the parchment and began to read, her lips moving slightly as she worked through the Latin. "You know," she said after a moment, "most people would be upset about the magical compulsion part. You are not most people." "No," she agreed. "I'm really not." She read in silence for another few minutes, then looked up. "This clause here, about submitting to monitoring, what does that entail exactly?" "I will need to see you regularly, weekly at minimum, to ensure you are adhering to the terms and to answer any questions that arise in your research. Weekly meetings with the Vampire King. That's going to do wonders for my academic reputation." "Your academic reputation will survive. Mine is rather more fragile." She laughed, sudden and genuine, and the sound filled the room like music. When had he last heard laughter in this place that was not edged with fear or malice? "All right," Rowan said. She held out her hand. "Do you have another pen?" He passed her the pen, watched as she signed her name in her own blood mixed with ink, watched the magic flare and settle around her like a second skin. The bond snapped into place between them, and he gasped. He could feel her. Not just her presence in the room, but her emotions, bright and curious and utterly without fear. She was excited, fascinated. The prospect of having access to his archives had lit her up from the inside, and he could feel that joy singing through the bond, like a bell. And underneath it, something else, a warmth, a pull, a sense of recognition that mirrored his own. She felt it too. Whatever this was between them, it was not one-sided. "Whoa," Rowan said quietly. She pressed a hand to her chest. "That's intense." "The bond will settle over time," Iskander managed. "The first few minutes are always the strongest." "Can you feel what I'm feeling?" "Yes." "Can I feel what you're feeling?" He tried to shore up his mental defenses, tried to hide the century of longing and loneliness and desperate hope that was threatening to spill through the bond and drown her. To a degree, but I am much older than you. I have better control. She looked at him for a long moment, and he had the uncomfortable sensation that she could see right through him. "You're scared," she said softly. "I am not scared." "You're something then. I can feel it. It's like—" She paused, searching for words. "Like standing at the edge of a cliff. That feeling right before you jump." Iskander stood abruptly, turning away from her toward the window. Below, he could see the main hall of his court, the elegant architecture carved from stone and sustained by magic. His people moved through the space like pale ghosts, beautiful and terrible and unchanging. "The archives will be open to you starting tomorrow night," he said. "I will have my steward prepare a workspace for you. Bring whatever materials you need. You may work until dawn." "Tomorrow night," Rowan repeated. "Does that mean I have to leave now?" "It is nearly dawn. The sun will rise in less than an hour. You should go home before the city wakes." "What about you?" "I will sleep. That is what my kind does during the day." He heard her stand, heard her footsteps crossing the room toward him. She stopped at his shoulder, close enough that he could smell the warmth of her, the sweet, mortal scent of her blood moving under her skin. "Iskander," she said, and the sound of his name in her voice made something in his chest twist painfully. "Thank you for this. I know it's not standard procedure to let humans into your archives. I won't waste the opportunity. See that you don't." She hesitated, and he could feel her curiosity through the bond, bright and eager. "Can I ask you something? Why do you look so sad?" The question caught him off guard. He turned to face her, this impossible, fearless woman who saw too much. "I am not sad. You're something. And it's not anger, and it's not scary Vampire King stuff. It's something softer." She paused. "It's all right if you don't want to tell me. We just met. But the bond goes both ways, remember? I can feel it, even if I don't understand it yet." Iskander looked at her, at this woman who was both stranger and familiar, both new and impossibly old to him. He had dreamed of her for 100 years. He had known her in his sleep better than he knew most of his own court. And now she was here, real and warm and alive, and he had no idea how to bridge the gap between the dream and the waking world. "Go home, Rowan," he said quietly. "Come back tomorrow night. We will speak more then." She nodded slowly, still watching him with those perceptive eyes. "Okay, tomorrow night." She turned toward the door, then paused and looked back. "For what it's worth, I'm glad I met you, even if you are a very dramatic Vampire King." Then she was gone, her footsteps fading down the corridor, and Iskander was alone in his beautiful room with his beautiful things and the echo of her presence still humming through the bond. He sank into his chair and put his head in his hands. 100 years. He had waited 100 years for this, and now that she was finally here, he had no idea what to do. The dreams had never prepared him for the reality of her, for the sharp intelligence and the fearlessness, and the way she made him feel simultaneously more alive and more terrified than he had felt in centuries. "So that's her." Iskander looked up. Margrave Soren stood in the doorway, one shoulder leaning against the frame. He was one of Iskander's oldest advisors, ancient even by vampire standards, his white hair pulled back in a style that had been fashionable in the Byzantine court. His expression was carefully neutral. "That is none of your concern," Iskander said. "The human who has been haunting your dreams for a century appears in our archives and signs a blood bond with you, and you think it's none of my concern?" Soren pushed off the doorframe and walked into the room. "Your Majesty, the entire court is talking about her. Let them talk. They will do more than talk if they think you are compromised. You know this." Soren stopped in front of the desk, his pale eyes serious. "We have enemies, within the court and without. If they believe you have developed a weakness, they will exploit it." "She is not a weakness. Then what is she?" Iskander did not answer. What could he say? That she was the answer to a question he had been asking for a century? That she was the missing piece of a puzzle he had not known he was trying to solve? that looking at her made him remember what it was like to be human, to feel hope, to want something beyond the endless gray stretch of immortality. "She is a researcher," he said finally. "Nothing more. She needed access to our archives for her work. I granted it under strict conditions. There is nothing sinister here. You bound yourself to her. A standard monitoring bond. You have never personally monitored anyone in 300 years. You always delegate." Iskander stood, letting his power fill the room, letting Soren feel the weight of his authority. "Are you questioning my decisions, Margrave?" Soren bowed his head immediately. "Never, my king. I merely urge caution." "Your caution is noted. You may go." The older vampire hesitated for just a moment, then turned and left, his footsteps silent on the stone. When he was gone, Iskander released the breath he had been holding and let his shoulders sag. Soren was right, of course. The court would see Rowan as a weakness, as a vulnerability to be exploited. And more than that, there were factions within his own people who had never accepted his rule, who waited for any sign of instability to make their move. Bringing a human into their midst, binding himself to her, giving her access to their most sacred archives, it was dangerous, reckless, completely unlike him. But when he closed his eyes, he could still see her standing in the archives, fearless and bright, and he knew he would do it again. He would do it 1,000 times over, consequences be damned, because she was the woman from his dreams, and he had been waiting for her for far too long to let her slip away now. The next night came slowly. Iskander woke at sunset, as he always did, rising from his rest with the slow, careful return to consciousness that came with centuries of practice. He dressed in dark clothes that were modern but elegant, a compromise between the ancient formality of his court and the contemporary world overhead. Then he went to the archives and waited. She arrived an hour after full dark, carrying a battered leather backpack and looking slightly disheveled, as though she had run all the way from the surface. Her cheeks were flushed with cold, and there were snowflakes melting in her dark hair. "Sorry I'm late," she said breathlessly. "The entrance wards took longer to navigate than I expected. I think they've been reinforced since last night." "I may have added a few additional layers," Iskander admitted. "I wanted to see if you could still get through." "That was a test? Consider it a practical examination of your skills." She grinned. "Did I pass?" "You're here, aren't you?" She laughed and set her backpack down on one of the long reading tables that filled the main archive chamber. "So, where do I start? You said I could access the Codex Sanguinis?" "Among other things." He gestured, and several books flew from the shelves to land gently on the table in front of her. She jumped slightly, then leaned forward to examine them. "Show off," she muttered, but there was warmth in her voice. "I am a 300-year-old vampire king. I am entitled to show off occasionally." "Occasionally? I suspect you do it all the time." She was right, of course, but he was not going to admit it. Instead, he pulled out a chair and sat across from her at the table. "Tell me about your research." Rowan looked up from the books, surprised. "You actually want to know?" "You invoked it to justify breaking into my archives. I am curious what could be worth such a risk." She settled back in her chair, and he could feel her enthusiasm through the bond, bright and eager. "Okay, so my dissertation is on the legal and social structures around blood-binding contracts in Eastern European vampire folklore. Most modern scholarship treats the vampire myth as pure fiction, right? Just superstition and fear of death manifesting as stories about the undead. But you don't think that." "I know that," she said, "because I'm sitting in a vampire archive talking to a vampire king. But even before I found you, I suspected there was some truth to the stories. The contracts are too detailed, too specific, too consistent across different regions and time periods to be pure invention. Someone, somewhere, was actually doing this. And you wanted to know who. I wanted to know how. What made the contracts binding? What were the rules? How did mortals and vampires negotiate these agreements, and what happened when they broke down?" She leaned forward, her eyes bright. "The folklore says that words have power, right? That the right phrase spoken in the right way can bind someone to an oath or break a curse or summon something from the dark. I wanted to know if that was true, and if so, how it worked." Iskander found himself leaning forward as well. drawn in by her passion. And what have you learned? That I was right. Language does have power, at least in the context of magic. The old contracts use specific grammatical structures that seem to channel intent into reality. It's not just what you say, but how you say it. The declension patterns, the verb forms, the word order, all of it matters. She gestured at the books in front of her. These texts are going to help me prove it. If I can map the evolution of these contracts over time, I can show how the magical grammar developed and changed with the languages themselves. That is ambitious. That's what my advisor says, right before she tells me I'm never going to graduate. Do you care? Rowan paused, considering. Yes and no. I care about the work. I care about understanding this. The degree is just the excuse that lets me do it full time. She smiled. What about you? What do you care about? The question caught him off guard. What did he care about? He had not asked himself that in decades, perhaps centuries. His duty was to his people, to maintaining their secrets and their safety. His role was to rule, to arbitrate, to stand as the fixed point around which the court turned. But those were obligations, not desires. What did he actually care about? I don't know, he said honestly. Rowan tilted her head, studying him. That's sad. It is merely true. Truth can be sad. She reached across the table, and for a moment he thought she might take his hand, but she stopped just short, her fingers resting on the ancient wood between them. You've been alive for 300 years. There has to be something that makes you happy. Happy? When had he last been happy? Not content, not satisfied, but actually happy. The dreams, he thought. When I dream of you, I am happy. But he could not say that. Not yet. Not when he did not understand what the dreams meant, where they came from, why she was the one fixed point in a century of sleeping. I enjoy music, he said instead, and I find satisfaction in governance. My people are safer and more prosperous under my rule than they have been in centuries. That sounds like a resume, not an answer. He almost smiled. You are very difficult, Miss Grey. I've been told that before. She pulled her hand back, picked up one of the books, and opened it carefully. All right, Vampire King, since you're here supervising me, you might as well help. How much do you know about the Dacian blood cults? They worked through the night. Iskander had expected to be bored, to find the work tedious, but instead he found himself drawn in by Rowan's enthusiasm and her quick, incisive mind. She read the ancient texts fluently, translating from Latin and Old Church Slavonic as though they were modern languages, pausing occasionally to ask him questions about context or history. He answered as best he could, dredging up memories from centuries past, from the early days of his turning when the world was wider and darker and full of things that had since faded into myth. She listened intently, taking notes in a shorthand he did not recognize, occasionally stopping him to ask for clarification or to argue a point. It was, he realized with some surprise, the best conversation he had had in decades. His court was full of politics and intrigue, of carefully worded statements and layered meanings. Everyone who spoke to him wanted something, or feared something, or was trying to manipulate him toward some goal. Even his advisors, even his friends, if he could call them that, approached him with the awareness that he was their king first and a person second. But Rowan argued with him about verb conjugations. She corrected him when he got a date wrong. She laughed when he made a dry comment about one of the more absurd blood-binding rituals, the sound bright and unguarded in the quiet archive. She treated him like a person, and he had not realized until that moment how desperately lonely he had been. It's almost dawn, he said eventually, noticing the subtle shift in the air that came just before sunrise. Rowan looked up from her notes, blinking in surprise. Already? We've been working for 8 hours. Time moves quickly when you are engrossed in your work. Apparently. She stretched, rolling her shoulders, and he heard her spine pop. God, I'm going to be useless in my morning seminar. I'm supposed to be teaching undergrads about folklore methodology in 4 hours. You teach? Part of the funding package. I teach 2 sections of intro folklore studies in exchange for tuition remission and a very small stipend. She started gathering her notes, tucking them carefully into her backpack. It's not bad. The students are enthusiastic, mostly, and it keeps me connected to the non-vampire side of my life. Are you planning to tell them about me? She looked at him, and he felt a pulse of something warm through the bond. Affection, maybe. Of course not. Apart from the magical compulsion that would literally kill me if I tried, I'm not an idiot. This is the discovery of a lifetime. I'm not going to waste it by blabbing to a bunch of 19-year-olds who would probably just think I'd gone crazy anyway. A pragmatic approach. I'm a pragmatic person. She shouldered her backpack and stood. Same time tomorrow night? If you wish. I wish. She paused at the edge of the table, looking at him with an expression he could not quite read. Thank you, Iskander, for tonight. I know you probably have better things to do than help a graduate student with her dissertation, but I really appreciate it. It was not a burden, he said quietly. She smiled, warm and genuine, and then she was gone, making her way back up through the wards and into the city above. Iskander sat alone in the archives, surrounded by ancient books and the ghost of her presence, and felt the sun rise somewhere far overhead. He did not dream of her that night. For the first time in 100 years, his sleep was dark and empty, and when he woke the next evening, he felt the loss of her like a physical ache. She had been real in the waking world, so his sleeping mind no longer needed to conjure her. He should have been relieved. Instead, he felt bereft. He went about his duties mechanically, sitting in court to hear petitions and disputes, meeting with his advisors to discuss the endless small crises that made up governance. But his mind was elsewhere, counting the hours until she would return. When she finally arrived, he felt it through the bond before he saw her, a bright spark of warmth descending through the wards. He was waiting in the archives when she appeared, and she grinned when she saw him. You're eager, she said. I am punctual. There is a difference. Keep telling yourself that. She set down her backpack and pulled out a thermos. I brought coffee. Want some? Oh, wait, you probably don't drink coffee. I can, he said. We can consume most human food and drink. It simply has no nutritional value for us. Huh. So you could eat a pizza if you wanted to? I could, though I would get no sustenance from it. But could you taste it? He considered. Yes. Taste remains even though the need for food does not. That's fascinating. She poured herself a cup of coffee, and the smell filled the archive, rich and bitter. So you gave up food when you returned, but you kept all the sensory experience of it. We gain other senses in exchange. Blood speaks to us in ways that mortal food never could. Blood speaks to you. That's a very poetic way of describing it. It is an accurate way. When we feed, we taste not just the blood itself, but the life in it, the emotions, the memories, the essence of the person. Every human is different. Every feeding is a conversation. Rowan was watching him intently, her coffee forgotten. That sounds terrifying. It can be. It is also intimate in ways that are difficult to describe. Do you kill people when you feed? The question was blunt, but he appreciated the directness. Not anymore. There are other ways to obtain blood now. Donors, blood banks, arrangements with humans who understand what we are. Killing is forbidden by my law except in self-defense or war. But it used to be allowed. It used to be necessary. The world was different 300 years ago. We were fewer, more scattered, and mortals did not understand us well enough to cooperate. We took what we needed to survive. He met her eyes. I am not proud of everything I have done to stay alive, but I am not ashamed of surviving either. She nodded slowly. I appreciate the honesty. You deserve honesty. The bond we share makes it difficult to lie to you in any case. Can you feel what I'm feeling right now? Curiosity, he said, and a little bit of fear, though you are working hard to suppress it. I'm not afraid of you. No. You are afraid of what you might learn about me, about my past, about the things I have done. You are afraid that if you learn too much, you will not be able to reconcile the person sitting in front of you with the monster I have been. She set down her coffee cup carefully. Are you a monster? By some definitions, yes. By others, no. I am a predator, Rowan. I have killed. I have ruled through fear when necessary. I am capable of great cruelty in service of my people's survival. He paused. But I have also spent centuries trying to build something better than what came before. I have made laws to protect mortals from my kind. I have created systems that allow us to coexist without bloodshed. I am trying to be more than what I was made to be. That takes courage. It takes stubbornness. Courage implies I had a choice. You always have a choice. Do I? When every instinct tells me to hunt, to kill, to take what I need without thought for the consequences, when the thirst is a living thing inside me, demanding satisfaction. He shook his head. You do not know what it is like, Rowan. To be this thing, to carry this hunger. The fact that I choose not to kill does not make me noble. It simply makes me tired. She reached across the table and took his hand. The touch was electric, sending a shock up his arm and straight into his chest. Her hand was warm, alive, her pulse beating steadily under her skin. I think it makes you brave, she said quietly. He looked down at their joined hands, at the contrast between her warm brown skin and his own pale white, and felt something break open inside him. The careful control he had maintained for 300 years, the distance he kept between himself and everyone around him, all of it crumbled in the face of her simple, honest touch. I dreamed of you, he said. The words came out before he could stop them, raw and unguarded. For 100 years I dreamed of you. Every night you were there, just out of reach. I did not know your name. I did not know your face, but I knew you. And now you are here, and I do not know what to do with that. Rowan's eyes widened. You dreamed of me? For 100 years? I thought I was going mad. The seers whispered that I was cursed, that something was trying to reach me through my sleep. I searched for answers, for any explanation, but found nothing. And then you appeared in my archives, and I knew you immediately. That's why you looked so shocked when I said I didn't fear you. You were supposed to be a dream, just a dream, and instead you were real. She squeezed his hand. I'm real. I promise. Why? Why did I dream of you? What are you to me? I don't know, she said softly. But maybe we can figure it out together. They sat like that for a long moment, hands joined across the ancient table, the question hanging in the air between them. Then Rowan took a breath and gently pulled her hand back. We should work, she said. I have a lot of ground to cover tonight. He nodded, grateful for the reprieve, and they turned back to the books. But something had shifted between them. The air felt heavier, charged with the weight of what he had confessed. And through the bond he could feel her thoughts churning, working through the implications of what he had told her. She did not pull away, though. She did not ask to leave or to dissolve the contract. She simply worked, reading and translating and taking notes, occasionally asking him questions that pulled him out of his own spiraling thoughts. And Iskander found himself watching her, memorizing the way she bit her lip when she was concentrating, the way she tucked her hair behind her ear, the small sighs of satisfaction when she found something particularly interesting in the texts. He had dreamed of her for 100 years. And now she was here, solid and real and brilliant, and he was falling for her all over again. The nights began to blur together. Rowan came every evening as soon as the sun set, and they worked side by side in the archives until dawn. Sometimes they talked about the research, arguing over translations or debating the finer points of magical theory. Sometimes they talked about other things. Her life at the university, his centuries of rule, the small details of their respective worlds. She told him about her childhood in a small town upstate, about discovering folklore studies in college and falling in love with the idea that stories might be true. She told him about her struggles with funding, about the professor who had dismissed her theories as fantasy until she provided enough evidence to change his mind. He told her about his turning, about the vampire who had made him and then abandoned him to figure out his new existence alone. He told her about the early years of his rule, when the court had been fractious and violent, and how he had slowly, painfully forged them into something resembling stability. They did not talk about the dreams. He wanted to understand what they meant, but every time he tried to bring it up, the word stuck in his throat. There was something about the dreams that felt too intimate, too raw to examine in the light of day, or rather, in the light of night. 3 weeks into their arrangement, Soren appeared in the archives while they were working. Iskander looked up from the manuscript he had been examining to find his advisor standing in the doorway, his expression carefully blank. "Your Majesty," Soren said. "Might I have a word?" Iskander glanced at Rowan. She was deep in her work, scribbling notes furiously, and did not seem to have noticed the interruption. "If you must." Soren's eyes flicked to Rowan, then back to Iskander. "In private, if possible." Iskander rose, gesturing for Soren to follow him out into the corridor. Once they were out of earshot, he turned to face his advisor. "What is so urgent that you must interrupt my evening?" "The court is talking, Your Majesty." "The court is always talking. They are talking about the human, about how much time you spend with her, about the bond you have forged." Soren lowered his voice. "There are those who believe you are compromised, that you have developed feelings for her. My feelings are my own concern, not when they affect your ability to rule." Soren stepped closer, his expression serious. "Iskander, please. I say this as your advisor and your friend. You are walking a dangerous path. If the court believes you are weakening, if they think you can be manipulated through this human—" "No one manipulates me," Iskander said coldly. "Not intentionally, perhaps. But feelings make us vulnerable. They cloud our judgment. You know this. I know that I have ruled this court successfully for 300 years, and I do not need you questioning my judgment now. I am not questioning your judgment. I am questioning your heart." Soren sighed. "You care for her. Anyone with eyes can see it. And that makes her a target. If your enemies believe they can hurt you through her, then I will destroy them," Iskander said flatly. "Anyone who touches her will answer to me." Soren looked at him for a long moment, and something like pity crossed his ancient face. "You are already lost, aren't you?" "I am not lost. I am exactly where I need to be. I hope you are right." Soren bowed his head. "For all our sakes, I hope you are right." He turned and walked away, his footsteps silent on the stone, leaving Iskander alone in the corridor with his thoughts churning. Was Soren right? Had he become compromised? Was his attachment to Rowan clouding his judgment? He thought of the way she laughed when he made a dry comment, the way her eyes lit up when she found something interesting in the texts, the way she treated him like a person instead of a title. He thought of the dreams, of 100 years searching for her in his sleep, and the relief of finally finding her in the waking world. Yes, he cared for her, more than cared. He was falling in love with her, slowly and inexorably, like a stone sinking through water. Was that weakness? Or was it the first real thing he had felt in centuries? He did not have an answer. But when he returned to the archives and found Rowan looking up at him with a question in her eyes, he knew he was not going to stop. Whatever this was between them, whatever danger it brought, he was committed now. "Everything okay?" Rowan asked. "Fine. Merely court business." She did not look convinced, but she let it go, turning back to her work. And Iskander sat back down across from her, pushing Soren's warnings to the back of his mind, and lost himself in the comfortable rhythm of her presence. It was another week before she asked the question he had been dreading. They were alone in his study this time, having moved there when the archives became too cold even for Rowan's tolerance. She sat curled in one of his chairs with a blanket wrapped around her shoulders, a cup of tea cooling on the side table, and she looked at him with those perceptive eyes and said, "Why me?" Iskander looked up from the correspondence he had been reviewing. "I do not understand the question. Why me? Out of all the humans in the world, why was I the one in your dreams? What makes me special?" "I do not know. But you must have theories." He set down his pen carefully. I have many theories. None of them are satisfactory. Tell me anyway. He rose from his desk and moved to the window, looking down at the court below. At first, I thought you were a prophecy. The seers in my court have visions sometimes, glimpses of the future or warnings of danger. I thought perhaps one of them had sent me these dreams to prepare me for your arrival. But when I asked them, they denied any knowledge, and the dreams felt different than prophecy. Prophecy is cold, clinical. These dreams were, he paused, searching for the word, personal. So, if not prophecy, then what? A curse, perhaps, a spell cast by an enemy to torment me, or a genuine vision sent by something older and more powerful than either of us, for purposes I cannot fathom. He turned to face her. Or perhaps nothing at all. Perhaps I am simply mad and you happen to match the phantom my mind created. You're not mad. How can you be certain? Because I feel it too, she said quietly. Iskander went still. What? The pull, the recognition. Like I've known you before, even though I know I haven't. She pulled the blanket tighter around herself. When I signed the bond, when I felt your emotions for the first time, it was like coming home. Like finding something I didn't know I'd lost. She looked up at him. So either we're both mad, or something is happening here that neither of us understands. He crossed the room in 3 long strides and knelt in front of her chair, bringing himself to eye level with her. You feel it. Of course I feel it. How could I not? She reached out and cupped his face in her warm hands, and the touch sent electricity racing through him. Iskander, I've been trying to figure out how to tell you. I didn't want to push, didn't want to make things weird. But every night I spend with you, it gets stronger. This feeling like you're supposed to be in my life, like I've been waiting for you without knowing it. I have been dreaming of you for 100 years, he said, his voice rough. I have been searching for you in every face I pass, every crowd, every moment, and now you are here, and you are everything I hoped and nothing I expected, and I do not know how to proceed. Maybe we don't need to know. Maybe we just see where this goes. It could go nowhere good. I am a vampire. You are human. The gap between us is vast. So we build a bridge. Rowan, I'm not afraid of you, remember? I told you that the first night we met, and it's still true. I'm not afraid of what you are or what you've done or how long you've lived. I'm only afraid of wasting this. She leaned forward, her forehead nearly touching his. Please don't pull away from me because you think you're protecting me. Let me make my own choices. He closed his eyes, breathing in the scent of her, warm and alive and impossible. I want to kiss you, he said quietly. Then kiss me. He did. He closed the last small distance between them and pressed his lips to hers, gentle at first, testing. She made a small sound in the back of her throat and kissed him back, her hands sliding from his face to his hair, pulling him closer. The kiss deepened, turned hungry. He could taste the tea on her lips, could feel her heartbeat racing through the bond, could sense the desire rising in her that matched his own. His hands found her waist, pulling her forward in the chair until she was pressed against him, and she wrapped her arms around his neck and held on like she was afraid he might disappear. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, he rested his forehead against hers and tried to find words. This is dangerous, he managed. I know. My court will not approve. I don't care. You should care. If they see you as a threat, as leverage against me, then we'll deal with it together. She pulled back just enough to look him in the eyes. I'm not going anywhere, Iskander, not unless you tell me to leave. I will never tell you to leave. Then stop trying to protect me from myself and kiss me again. He laughed, sudden and genuine, and did as she asked. They stayed like that for a long time, kissing in the candlelight, the bond between them singing with shared emotion. When they finally pulled apart, Rowan was smiling, bright and joyful, and Iskander felt something in his chest that he had not felt in centuries. Hope. But hope, he knew, was a fragile thing, and the forces arrayed against them were far from finished. The next night, Rowan did not come to the archives. Iskander waited, tension coiling tighter in his chest with each passing hour. He reached out through the bond, searching for her, and found only distance. She was alive, He could feel that much. But she was far away, and there was something muffled about her presence, as though something was blocking their connection. By midnight, he was pacing his study like a caged animal. By 2 in the morning, he was ready to tear the city apart looking for her. And then, just before dawn, she stumbled through the wards. He met her at the archive entrance and nearly recoiled at what he saw. She was pale, shaking, her eyes glazed with exhaustion. There were dark circles under her eyes, and her hands trembled as she reached for him. "Iskander," she whispered. He caught her before she fell, scooping her into his arms and carrying her up to his study. "What happened? Are you hurt?" "I'm okay. I couldn't get away. Someone was watching me." Ice ran down his spine. "Someone was watching you? Who?" "I don't know. I felt it. Like there were eyes on me everywhere I went. And every time I tried to come here, something would happen. My car wouldn't start. The subway would break down. I'd turn a corner and find the street blocked off." She shivered. "It felt deliberate, like someone didn't want me to reach you." Iskander set her down carefully on the couch and knelt beside her, taking her cold hands in his. "Someone from my court. Are you sure? Who else would have reason to keep you away? Who else would have the power to manipulate circumstances like that?" He cursed under his breath. "I should have anticipated this. I should have protected you better. You couldn't have known. I should have known. Soren warned me. He said the court was talking, that there were those who saw you as a threat." He stood abruptly, rage coiling hot in his chest. "I will find who did this, and I will make them answer for it." "Iskander, wait." But he was already moving, striding out of his study and down into the main hall of the court. His people turned to look as he entered, conversations dying mid-sentence, and he let his power fill the space like smoke. "Which of you," he said, his voice carrying to every corner of the hall, "dared to interfere with my guest?" Silence. No one moved. No one spoke. "I will ask once more. Who kept the human from reaching me tonight?" Still nothing. But he could see it in their faces, the carefully neutral expressions, the studied indifference. They knew. Someone knew, and they were protecting whoever had done it. "Your Majesty." Iskander turned. An elder vampire named Lady Cassia had stepped forward, her white hair braided in an intricate crown, her pale eyes cold. "If I may speak." "You may. The court is concerned. You have been spending an unusual amount of time with this human. You have bound yourself to her, given her access to our most sacred archives, shared our secrets. Some feel this is unwise." "Some?" Iskander repeated, his voice dangerous. "And who are these some?" "Many of us, Your Majesty. We worry that you are compromised, that your judgment is clouded by—" She paused delicately. "Personal feelings." "My personal feelings are not the court's concern. They are when they affect your ability to rule. You are the king. Your first duty is to your people, not to some mortal you have known for less than a month." The rage in his chest was a living thing now, clawing to get out. But he held it in check, forced himself to remain calm. "You speak of duty. Let me tell you about duty. I have ruled this court for 300 years. I have kept us safe, kept us hidden, built a society that allows us to exist in the modern world without persecution. I have made laws that protect mortals from our worst impulses, that allow us to feed without killing, that create the possibility of coexistence." He stepped forward, and Lady Cassia flinched despite herself. "Do not lecture me about duty when I have spent 3 centuries fulfilling it, while the rest of you bickered and schemed and tried to tear each other apart. You merely decided that you knew better than your king. You decided that my choices were yours to approve or deny. You decided that you had the right to interfere with my life." He let the full weight of his power crash down on the hall, and several of the younger vampires dropped to their knees. "You were wrong." Lady Cassia raised her chin, defiant. "And if we believe you are leading us toward disaster, then you are welcome to challenge me for the throne. The old laws still apply. Any vampire who believes they can rule better than I do may face me in single combat. Otherwise, you will obey me, or you will leave my court." The silence that followed was absolute. No one moved. No one breathed. "I thought not," Iskander said coldly. "Now, I will ask one final time. Who interfered with Rowan tonight? A younger vampire near the back raised his hand slowly. I did, Your Majesty. Iskander focused on him, and the vampire wilted under his gaze. Come here. The vampire approached slowly, head bowed. When he was close enough, Iskander grabbed him by the throat and lifted him off his feet. Why? Iskander demanded. Lady Cassia asked me to, the vampire choked out. She said the human was a distraction, that you needed to be reminded of your priorities. Iskander looked at Lady Cassia. She met his gaze steadily, no shame in her expression. You overstepped, Iskander said quietly. I did what I thought necessary. You decided that my will was less important than yours. You decided that you could manipulate me like a puppet. He dropped the younger vampire, who crumpled to the floor gasping. I could kill you for that. The old laws would support me. Then kill me, Lady Cassia said, but it will not change the truth. You are compromised, Iskander. That human has blinded you to the dangers around you. No. She has reminded me what it is like to feel something other than duty. He turned to address the entire hall. I am your king. I will continue to be your king, and Rowan Grey is under my protection. Anyone who harms her, who threatens her, who so much as makes her uncomfortable, will answer to me personally. Is that understood? Murmurs of assent rippled through the hall. Good. Now get out of my sight, all of you. The court dispersed quickly, vampires vanishing into the shadows and side passages. Lady Cassia was the last to leave, pausing at the edge of the hall to look back at him. You are making a mistake, she said. Perhaps, but it is my mistake to make. She shook her head and disappeared into the dark. Iskander stood alone in the empty hall, his rage slowly cooling into something harder and more determined. They would not accept Rowan. They would never accept her. Not as long as she remained human, not as long as she represented a vulnerability, which meant he had to make a choice. He found her still curled on the couch in his study, a blanket wrapped around her shoulders. She looked up when he entered, and he could see the question in her eyes. Did you find out who did it? She asked. Yes, it has been dealt with. What did you do? Made it clear that you are not to be touched. He sat beside her, and she immediately leaned into him, resting her head on his shoulder. I am sorry, Rowan. I should have anticipated this. It's not your fault. It is, though. I brought you into this world. I bound you to me. I made you a target. She was quiet for a moment. Do you regret it? No, never. But I fear what it might cost you. Then let me worry about the cost. She took his hand, lacing her fingers through his. I knew what I was getting into when I signed that contract. I knew there would be danger. I did it anyway. Why? She turned to look at him, her eyes serious. Because when I'm with you, I feel like I'm exactly where I'm supposed to be. Like everything in my life led me to this moment, to you. I don't know if that's fate or destiny or just coincidence, but I know I don't want to walk away from it. He kissed her forehead gently. You are braver than I am. I doubt that. They sat together as the first light of dawn began to filter down through the light shafts, painting the ceiling in shades of gold. Rowan yawned, exhaustion finally catching up with her. You should go home, Iskander said. Rest. Come back tomorrow night if you wish. I wish, she said sleepily, but I'm too tired to navigate your wards right now. Can I sleep here? He should say no. Having her here, vulnerable and sleeping, in the heart of his court with enemies watching, was dangerous. But he could not bring himself to send her away. Yes, he said. You can sleep here. He carried her to his private chambers, a suite of rooms behind his study that few in the court had ever seen. He laid her gently on his bed, pulled the blankets over her, and sat in the chair beside her to keep watch. She was asleep within minutes, her breathing slow and steady. And Iskander sat in the growing light, watching her sleep, and made his decision. The dreams had been a gift and a curse. A century of searching, of longing, of hoping for something he could not name. And now that he had found her, now that she was real and warm and choosing him despite all the dangers, he was not going to let anyone take her away, even if it meant standing against his entire court. even if it meant burning his kingdom to the ground. When Rowan woke, it was already evening again. She sat up slowly, disoriented, and found Iskander sitting in the chair beside the bed, watching her with those pale, intense eyes. "You stayed," she said. "I stayed." "Did you sleep at all?" "Vampires do not sleep the way humans do. We rest during the day, a state of suspended animation. But I chose to remain conscious. I wanted to be sure you were safe." She reached out and took his hand. "Thank you. You do not need to thank me for protecting you. I do, though, because you didn't have to. You could have sent me away after last night, told me it was too dangerous, ended the contract." She squeezed his hand. "But you didn't." "I could not. Could not, or would not. Both." He stood, pulling her gently to her feet. "Come, there is something I need to show you." He led her through the winding passages of his court, deeper than she had ever gone before. They passed through chambers carved with ancient symbols, through halls lit by phosphorescent fungi that glowed with an eerie blue light, through spaces that felt older than the city above. Finally, they reached a door carved from black stone, sealed with wards that made the air shimmer. "What is this place?" Rowan asked. "The Chamber of Seers, where my court's prophets come to have their visions." He placed his hand on the door, and the wards dissolved like smoke. "I need you to see something." Inside, the chamber was circular, the walls covered in murals that seemed to shift and move in the candlelight. In the center of the room stood a pool of black water, perfectly still, reflecting the ceiling above. And beside the pool stood an ancient vampire, so old that their skin was nearly translucent, their white hair falling to the floor. They turned as Iskander and Rowan entered, and their eyes were milky white, blind. "Your Majesty," the seer said, their voice like wind over stone, "you bring the mortal. I bring Rowan Grey, the woman from my dreams, and I want answers, Seraphim." The seer tilted their head, as if listening to something only they could hear. "You want to know why you dreamed of her. You want to know if it was fate or manipulation." "Yes." Seraphim moved to the pool, running their fingers over the surface of the water. It rippled at their touch, and images began to form in the depths. Iskander stepped closer, and Rowan moved with him, her hand tight in his. "A century ago," Seraphim said, "I had a vision. I saw the king bound to a mortal woman, their souls entwined across the barrier between life and death. I saw this union bringing great power to our court, or great destruction, depending on the path chosen." Iskander went still. "You sent me the dreams." "I did. I reached into your sleeping mind and planted the image of her, night after night, year after year. I thought if you searched for her, if you found her, you would fulfill the prophecy I had seen. You manipulated me. I guided you toward your destiny." "No." The word came out cold and hard. "You tried to control me. You tried to force me down a path of your choosing, using my own mind against me." Rowan was staring at the seer, her expression somewhere between horror and fury. "You used him. You used both of us." "I did what was necessary," Seraphim said calmly. "The prophecy showed two paths. In one, you meet by chance and fall in love naturally. And in that path, your union brings destruction. The king abandons his duties, the court falls into chaos, and our people are exposed to the mortal world. In the other, he searches for you, finds you, and the love is tainted by knowledge of the manipulation. He resents the bond, pushes you away, and the prophecy is averted." "You wanted him to resent me," Rowan said slowly. "You wanted him to reject the bond. I wanted to save our people from the destruction the prophecy foretold. If the king knew the dreams were manufactured, he would fight against them. He would prove his will was his own by pushing you away, and we would all be safe." Iskander was shaking with rage, his power filling the chamber like a thunderstorm. "You played with my mind for a century. You made me think I was going mad. You turned my dreams into a prison, all to manipulate me into doing what you wanted. I did what I had to do. You had no right. I had the right given to all seers, the right to guide our people away from disaster. You lied, Rowan said. Her voice was quiet, but there was steel in it. Prophecies show possibilities, not certainties. You chose to interpret your vision in the way that served your purposes, and then you manipulated everyone involved to make it come true. Seraphim turned their blind eyes toward her. You are clever, mortal, but cleverness will not save you from fate. There is no fate, Iskander said. His voice was cold, controlled, but Rowan could feel the fury burning through the bond. There is only choice, and I choose her. Not because you planted her in my dreams, not because some prophecy says I should, but because she is brave and brilliant and sees me as more than just a king. He stepped forward, towering over the ancient seer. You failed, Seraphim. Your manipulation only made me more certain that she is what I want. Then you doom us all. No, I free us from your control. He turned to Rowan. The dreams were not real. The century I spent searching for you was built on a lie. But what I feel for you now, what we have built together over these past weeks, that is real. That is mine. And I will not let anyone take it away. Not even fate itself. Rowan looked at him, this ancient, powerful being who was choosing her despite prophecy, despite manipulation, despite everything. I don't care why you dreamed of me, she said softly. I care about who you are when you're with me. And that person, the one who sits in the archives arguing about grammar and listens to my theories and kisses me like I'm precious, that person is real. That's what matters. You would defy prophecy for me. I would defy anything for you. He kissed her then, fierce and desperate, and she kissed him back with all the certainty in her heart. When they pulled apart, he turned back to Seraphim. You are relieved of your position, he said coldly. You will be confined to these chambers until I decide what to do with you. You will send no more visions, plant no more dreams, and have no more contact with the court. You cannot imprison a seer, your majesty. We are beyond such. Iskander raised his hand, and power blazed from him, sealing the chamber with wards so strong that the air crackled. Watch me. He took Rowan's hand and led her from the chamber, leaving Seraphim alone in the dark. The confrontation with Seraphim sent shockwaves through the court. Within hours, everyone knew that the seer had been imprisoned, that the king's dreams had been manufactured, that he had chosen the mortal woman despite knowing the prophecy. The court fractured. Some supported Iskander, believing that he had the right to choose his own path. Others sided with the traditionalists, arguing that defying prophecy was inviting disaster, and in the middle of it all, Iskander and Rowan tried to find their footing. They spent every night together now, in the archives or in his study, working on her research or simply talking. The bond between them had deepened, strengthened by their shared defiance of fate. She could feel his emotions as clearly as her own, could sense his moods, his thoughts, the way he steadied himself when his control threatened to slip. And he could feel her, bright and warm and utterly unafraid, a constant presence in the back of his mind that kept him grounded. 3 weeks after the confrontation, Lady Cassia requested an audience. Iskander received her in his study, with Rowan sitting beside him. He had made it clear that she was to be included in all court business that concerned her, and the court had grudgingly accepted. Your Majesty, Lady Cassia said, bowing her head, I come to offer my apologies. Iskander raised an eyebrow. Apologies? I was wrong to interfere. I allowed my fear for our people's safety to override my loyalty to you. I should have trusted your judgment. She paused. I also come with information. What information? There are those in the court who are planning to challenge you. They believe you are compromised, that the mortal has made you weak. They intend to invoke the old laws and fight you for the throne. Iskander leaned back in his chair. Who? Margrave Sorin leads them. He has gathered a coalition of the older families. They plan to challenge you at the next full moon. Sorin, his oldest advisor, his friend. The betrayal stung, but Iskander could not say he was surprised. Sorin had warned him after all, and when the warnings were not heeded, he had acted. Thank you for the information, Iskander said evenly. What will you do? What I must. Lady Cassia nodded and left, and Iskander sat in silence, processing this new development. He's going to challenge you to a fight, Rowan asked quietly. It appears so. Can you win? I am 300 years old and one of the most powerful vampires alive. Soren is older, but I am faster, stronger. I will win. But you don't want to fight him. He looked at her, unsurprised that she had seen through him. No, he was my friend, or the closest thing to a friend I have had in centuries. I do not want to kill him. Then don't. Find another way. There is no other way. If I refuse the challenge, I forfeit the throne. If I fight and spare him, I appear weak. Either way, my rule ends. Rowan was quiet for a long moment, and he could feel her thoughts churning through the bond. What if you didn't fight him at all? I just explained, what if you gave up the throne? Iskander stared at her. What? You've been ruling for 300 years. You're tired. You said so yourself. What if you just walked away? I cannot walk away. My people need me. Do they? Or do they need a king? And you've just been filling that role because no one else could? She leaned forward. Iskander, you've spent 3 centuries putting everyone else first. Your people, your court, your duty. When do you get to choose what you want? I am choosing. I am choosing you. But you're also trying to choose the throne, and I don't think you can have both, not the way things are going. She took his hands. If you fight Soren, you might win. But then what? The court will still be fractured. There will always be someone else who thinks you're compromised, who challenges you, who tries to use me against you. Is that the life you want? Constantly fighting to maintain power while trying to protect me? What alternative is there? Walk away. Give the throne to someone else. Let them deal with the politics and the prophecies and all of it, and you and I can just be. It was the most radical idea anyone had ever suggested to him. Kings did not walk away. Power, once claimed, was held until death or defeat. That was the way it had always been. But he was so tired. 300 years of ruling, of arbitrating disputes, of managing his court's endless machinations. 300 years of duty and responsibility and loneliness. And now there was Rowan, offering him something he had never dared hope for, a life of his own choosing. I would be giving up everything, he said slowly. You would be giving up power. That's not the same as everything. My people will survive. They survived before you and they'll survive after. Someone else will step up, someone who actually wants the throne. He closed his eyes, imagining it. A life without court politics, without the weight of a crown. A life where he could spend his nights in the archives with Rowan, learning from her, laughing with her, building something new. A life where he was just Iskander, not the king. I need to think about this, he said finally. Okay. She squeezed his hands. But think about it seriously, because I don't want you to sacrifice yourself for a throne you don't even want anymore. He pulled her into his arms, holding her close, and felt the steady beat of her heart against his chest. She was right. She was absolutely right. But letting go of 3 centuries of identity was not something he could do lightly. The full moon came too quickly. Iskander stood in the center of the court's great hall, with his people gathered around him in a circle. Margrave Soren stood across from him, white hair pulled back, expression resolute. Do you challenge my rule? Iskander asked formally. I do, Your Majesty. I invoke the old laws, single combat to the death or submission. On what grounds? On the grounds that you have become compromised, that your judgment is clouded by your attachment to a mortal, that you are no longer fit to lead. Iskander could feel Rowan through the bond, watching from the edge of the hall where she stood with Lady Cassia. She was afraid, but not for herself, for him. He looked around at his court, at the vampires he had ruled for 300 years. Some looked eager, anticipating violence. Others looked nervous, uncertain. But all of them were watching him, waiting to see what he would do. And he realized in that moment that Rowan had been right. He did not want this anymore. "I refuse your challenge," Iskander said. Shocked murmurs rippled through the hall. Soren's eyes widened. "You cannot refuse. The old laws say I must either accept the challenge or forfeit the throne. I choose to forfeit." He stripped off the silver chain he wore around his neck, the symbol of his authority, and held it up. "I abdicate. I renounce my claim to the throne and all the power that comes with it. As of this moment, I am no longer your king." The hall erupted into chaos. Vampires shouting, arguing, some trying to approach him and being held back by others. Through it all, Soren stood frozen, staring at him in disbelief. "You cannot do this," Soren said. "I just did. The court will fall into chaos without you. Then step up and lead it. You wanted to challenge me because you thought you could rule better. Here is your chance." Iskander tossed the chain to Soren, who caught it reflexively. "You are the eldest. You have the most support among the traditionalists. Take the throne and prove you can hold it." Iskander. But Iskander was already walking away, cutting through the crowd toward Rowan. She met him at the edge of the hall, her eyes wide. "Did you really just give up the throne?" she asked. "I did. Why?" "Because you were right. I have spent 300 years doing what I thought I had to do. I am tired of duty. I want to choose my own path." He took her hands. "I want to choose you." She threw her arms around him, and he held her tight, blocking out the chaos of the hall behind him. The court could sort itself out. Soren could have his throne, or someone else could take it, or they could descend into civil war for all he cared. For the first time in 3 centuries, he was free. They left the court that night, climbing up through the hidden passages to the surface. The city spread out before them, lights glittering in the darkness, and Iskander breathed in the cold night air and felt something loosen in his chest. "What now?" Rowan asked. "Now? Now we figure out how to build a life together." "Just like that?" "Just like that." She laughed, breathless and joyful. "You make it sound so simple." "Perhaps it is. Perhaps we have been making it complicated." He turned to her, cupping her face in his hands. "I love you, Rowan Grey. I have loved you since before I met you, and I will love you until the world ends. And I am choosing you freely and without reservation. No prophecy, no manipulation, no fate, just choice." "I love you too," she said, tears shining in her eyes. "God, I love you so much." They kissed there on the surface, with the city lights around them and the stars above, and for the first time in a century, Iskander's mind was quiet. No dreams, no visions, no whispers of prophecy. Just the woman in his arms and the future stretching out before them, unwritten and full of possibility. But there was still one thing left to address. "Rowan," Iskander said carefully, "there is something we need to discuss." "That sounds ominous." "It is practical. You are human, I am immortal. Eventually, that gap will become insurmountable." She pulled back to look at him. "You're asking if I want to be turned. I am giving you the option. You do not have to decide now, but it is something we need to consider." She was quiet for a long moment, and he waited, not pushing, letting her process. Finally, she said, "What would it be like if I was turned?" "Painful, at first. The transformation takes 3 days. You would die, in a sense, and be reborn as something new. But you would keep your memories, your personality, everything that makes you yourself. You would simply be more. Would I still be able to do my research? Of course. You would have enhanced strength, speed, senses, and all the time in the world to pursue your work. Would I have to give up the sun? Yes. Sunlight would burn you. You would live by night, as I do." She looked up at the sky, at the stars barely visible through the city's light pollution. "That's a big sacrifice." "It is, which is why I would never pressure you to make it." He took her hands. "If you choose to remain human, we will find a way. I will treasure every moment we have, however long that is. But if you choose to turn, I will be with you through the transformation and every night thereafter. Can I think about it?" Take all the time you need." They walked through the city together, hand in hand, talking about small things and large, about her dissertation and his uncertain future, about what it might look like to build a life outside the court. By the time they reached her apartment, dawn was approaching, and Iskander could feel the pull of sleep tugging at him. "Stay," Rowan said. "I have blackout curtains. You'll be safe." He hesitated. "Are you certain?" "Very certain." He followed her up to her small apartment, a cozy space filled with books and papers and the warm clutter of a life well lived. She drew the blackout curtains, plunging the room into darkness, and led him to her bed. They lay together as the sun rose somewhere beyond the walls, and Iskander held her close, breathing in the scent of her, memorizing the feel of her in his arms. "I'm going to do it," Rowan said quietly. "Do what?" "Turn. I'm going to ask you to turn me." His heart, which had not beat in 300 years, seemed to stutter. "Are you certain?" "I'm certain. I've been thinking about it since you first mentioned the possibility, and I know it's what I want. Not just to be with you forever, though that's part of it, but to have the time to really understand this world I've discovered, to learn everything there is to know about vampire history and magic and culture. I could spend 1,000 years researching and never run out of questions." She turned to face him in the dark. "And I want to do it with you." "When?" "Soon. After I finish this semester. I'll need to tie up some loose ends, tell my advisor I'm taking a leave of absence, get my affairs in order. But then I'm ready." He kissed her forehead, her cheeks, her lips. "I will make it as easy as I can. I will be with you every moment. I know." They fell asleep like that, tangled together, and for the first time in living memory, Iskander slept without dreams, just darkness and peace and the warm presence of the woman he loved. The next few months passed in a blur of activity. Rowan finished her semester, turned in her dissertation proposal, and arranged for a leave of absence from the university. Iskander, newly freed from his duties as king, helped her pack up her apartment and arrange her affairs. The court, meanwhile, had settled under Soren's leadership. The old vampire had accepted the throne reluctantly, but he was proving to be a capable ruler. He sent word to Iskander that he was welcome to return if he wished, that there were no hard feelings, but Iskander declined. That part of his life was over. The night Rowan was ready, they returned to the underground complex one last time. Not to the court itself, but to a small, private chamber Iskander had maintained for his own use over the centuries. A quiet space, away from the politics and intrigue. Rowan sat on the edge of the bed and he knelt in front of her. "Are you absolutely certain?" he asked one last time. "Absolutely. It will hurt. I know. You will die. And be reborn. I know." She cupped his face in her hands. "Stop trying to talk me out of it. I want this. I want you. I want forever." He kissed her palms. "Very well. Lie back." She lay back on the bed, and he stretched out beside her. "I will need to drain most of your blood first. You will become weak, disoriented. When you are close to death, I will offer you my blood. You must drink. 3 swallows is traditional, but take as much as you need." "Okay. The transformation will begin immediately. Your body will shut down as the vampire nature takes hold. For 3 days, you will be caught between life and death. I will stay with you the entire time. I trust you." He took a steadying breath, then leaned in and kissed her neck, gentle and reverent. "I love you, Rowan Grey. I love you too." He bit down. The taste of her blood was exquisite, everything he had imagined and more, sweet and warm and alive, full of her essence, her memories, her love. He drank carefully, monitoring her heartbeat through the bond, feeling her grow weaker in his arms. When her pulse began to flutter, when he could sense her hovering on the edge of consciousness, he pulled back and bit his own wrist. Blood welled, dark and rich, and he pressed it to her lips. "Drink," he whispered. She drank. 1 swallow, 2, 3. Her eyes fluttered closed, and her body went limp, and the transformation began. For 3 days, Iskander did not leave her side. He held her through the convulsions, through the fever, through the moments when she cried out in pain or confusion. He whispered to her in the darkness, telling her stories, reminding her who she was, promising her that the pain would end. On the third day, as the sun set, her eyes opened. They were pale silver now, the color of moonlight, and when she looked at him, he could see the change in her. She was still Rowan, but more, sharper, brighter, more alive than she had ever been. "Iskander," she whispered, and her voice was like music. "I am here." It worked. It worked. She sat up slowly, looking at her hands, flexing her fingers. "I can hear your heartbeat. I can hear the people moving around in the chambers below us. I can smell the stone and the earth and, oh my God, is that blood? You will be hungry. That is normal. I'm starving." He had prepared for this, had arranged for a donor to be waiting nearby. He helped Rowan to her feet, steadied her when she swayed, and led her to the adjoining room where a young human waited, someone who had volunteered to help newly turned vampires learn to feed. Rowan's eyes locked onto the human, and her fangs descended with a click. "Easy," Iskander murmured. "Go slowly. Take only what you need." She approached the human carefully, instinct warring with her natural compassion. But when she finally bit down, when she tasted blood for the first time as a vampire, the ecstasy on her face was unmistakable. She drank, and when she finally pulled back, the human was dazed but alive. Rowan licked her lips and then turned to Iskander with wonder in her eyes. "That was incredible," she breathed. "Welcome to immortality," he said, and pulled her into his arms. They left the underground that night and did not look back. The city was theirs now, full of possibility and promise. They rented a house on the outskirts, a place with a basement that could be sealed against the sun and a library where Rowan could continue her research. She threw herself into her work with renewed energy, using her new vampire abilities to translate texts faster, to work through the night without tiring, to pursue leads that had been impossible as a human. And Iskander was with her every step of the way, her partner in research and in life. They traveled, visiting vampire courts around the world, gathering stories and histories and forgotten lore. They made friends among Iskander's kind and among the humans who knew about them. They built a life that was entirely their own, free from prophecy or duty or anyone's expectations but their own. And every night when they lay together in the darkness, Iskander thanked whatever force had brought her into his life. Not the seer's manipulation, not the false dreams, but the real woman who had walked into his archives and told him she did not fear him, because she had been right from the very beginning. There was nothing to fear in loving each other, only everything to gain. 1 year after Rowan's turning, they returned to the underground to seal Seraphim's chamber permanently. The ancient seer had spent the year in isolation, cut off from the court and their visions, and when Iskander and Rowan descended to the chamber of seers one last time, they found the seer aged beyond recognition, their power faded. "You came to gloat," Seraphim said, their voice weak. "No," Iskander said. "We came to let you know that you failed. The prophecy you saw, the destruction you feared, none of it came to pass, because we chose our own path. The prophecy is not yet complete. There is still time for disaster. There is always time for disaster," Rowan said. "That's life. But we're not afraid of it anymore. We're not living our lives trying to avoid some predicted future. We're just living." "Foolish mortals," Seraphim spat. "I'm not mortal anymore," Rowan pointed out. "And Iskander was never foolish. You underestimated us both." Iskander placed his hand on the door, reinforcing the wards that sealed the chamber. "You will remain here. The new king has agreed to provide for your basic needs, but you will have no contact with the outside world. Your age of manipulation is over. You cannot silence prophecy, king who was. No, but we can choose not to listen." He took Rowan's hand. "Come, we have better things to do than argue with a failed manipulator." They walked out of the chamber together, and Iskander sealed it behind them with a finality that sang through the stone. The prophecy was ended. Not because it had been fulfilled or averted, but because they had simply stopped caring about it. They climbed back to the surface, to the city that sparkled under the stars, and Rowan squeezed his hand. "Where to now?" she asked. "Anywhere we want," he said. "The world is wide and the night is long and we have forever to explore it." "Then let's start with coffee. I'm starving and I want to test this theory about vampire taste buds and espresso." He laughed, genuine and free, and let her pull him toward the nearest cafe. Behind them, the entrance to the underground sealed itself, and the city moved on, oblivious to the two vampires walking hand in hand through its streets. A century ago, Iskander had dreamed of finding her, and now that they had chosen each other freely and without reservation, he understood that the dreams had never mattered. What mattered was this, her hand in his, her laughter in the night air, the future stretching out before them unscripted and full of joy. They had defied prophecy, they had abandoned power, they had walked away from everything that was supposed to define them. And in doing so, they had found exactly what they were looking for, each other, forever.